Intersectional failure, when hashtag believe all women runs right into hashtag falsely accused African American boys. Next on Campus Roundup. Hello, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the Campus Roundup at the College Fix. Our top story segment today focuses on hashtag believe all survivors. This is a great intersectional feminist trope there, but the problem is more and more men are falling victim to a lack of due process, especially more African American males on college campuses being falsely accused of sexual assault by white girls. To talk more about this, we welcome Michael Jones, a student at Auburn University and a reporter at the College Fix. Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You wrote a very illuminating article, kind of a compilation. 11 different times young African-American men were railroaded by campus sexual assault claims. And it's not just white women who left them out to dry, it's the campus administrators. Talk about the basis for your story.
So the basis is under the Obama administration in 2011, the Title IX regulations were changed, and really, everyone was stripped of their due process right. And so it kind of set up these kangaroo courts on college campuses, and it's had very devastating effects. Young men have had their lives ruined, and they won't get that part of their lives back ever again.
Yeah, and I think kangaroo court is an exact definition of what's happening here. This is not constitutional. This is not due process. We are not respecting the constitutional rights of the accused. We are assuming these boys on college campuses are guilty, and they're not even allowed in many instances to try to prove their innocence. So could pick a couple of the stories that were the most moving to you of the 11 cases that you went through. Give us some examples of some of the more egregious cases.
I would say the very popular one in Tennessee that recently just wrapped up. It happened nearly 4 years ago. A.J. Johnson and Michael Williams, they were Tennessee football players, and they were falsely accused. But they lost their scholarships, kicked out of school, couldn't return to campus. It took 4 years to wrap up, and it finally came out and they were fully acquitted, and neither one of their lives is the same. That was a pretty rough one. Another one was a Sacred Heart University football player. The girl accused them, and the school turned against them completely, stripped their due process rights. In this case, she just wanted to gain sympathy for a potential boyfriend. I thought that one was pretty bad as well.
And in all 11 cases, it's been documented that the boys that were accused were innocent, despite the fact that very often they were not allowed to defend themselves. They were not actually informed in some cases what the charges were, who was filing these charges. They never really got to confront their accusers. In all of these cases where these boys were found innocent, were there ever any consequences for the false accusers, the females?
The Sacred Heart accuser, she did spend a year in prison. She admitted that the stories, the accusers were false. But most of the time, the accusers, even when it's blatantly false and they admit it, they don't get much penalty at all.
And what sounds really outrageous to me is any consequence does not come from the universities. It comes when it spills out into the courts. The universities have apparently no accountability. It doesn't matter. The universities aren't the least bit bothered that they'd ruin these kids' lives. And what is shocking about it is, with all the sanctimony that's coming from our university campuses about diversity, and especially about the historical plight of African Americans, to do this to African American boys shamelessly, no apologies from the university, no consequences for the primarily white girls who sold these kids down the road. This is a rhetorical question for you. Give me your best shot at it. But why do you think it is that universities can betray a group of kids who they have vowed specifically to protect and seem to me not the least bit remorseful for it?
I really have no idea. I mean, I've been covering campuses for over a year. They're notoriously liberal. And when you think about it, you think that they focus so much on race, diversity, and all that. They throw it all out the door when it comes to this type of stuff. I don't know if it's because it was policies that the Obama administration ministered or what, but you see this, and they throw all of that out the door when it comes to stuff like this.
This hashtag believe all women is really anti-American. All women deserve to be heard, as do all men. You believe based on evidence. And you think about what you've done, this great story here, and then you think about all the lessons that weren't learned in the Justice Kavanaugh hearings, right? I mean, what alarms me about the Kavanaugh hearings is it seems to me a clear-cut case where this goofy, unconstitutional campus approach to assault is now being applied or attempted to be applied in our political arena. And that's going to have very dangerous consequences moving forward.
Absolutely. That's exactly what they want. If you look at the Kavanaugh case and then look at all of these, they're very similar. A lot of these institutions went straight to believing the women and really shafted the men. And that's what the left wanted to happen in the Kavanaugh hearings. And that's terrifying.
Michael Jones, we really appreciate your time today. Thank you, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right, time now for Expert Talk, where we take an opportunity to seek out the opinions of education specialists. Today, I'm joined by Cynthia Garrett, co-president of Families Advocating for Campus Equality, a nonprofit organization that supports students accused of sexual misconduct on college campuses. Cynthia, welcome to the program, and thank you very much for your work.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's not always been a public subject, a positive subject to advocate about. I mean, we've had a lot of pushback, been called MRAs and hate groups, and, you have it. But I believe so firmly in this mission that I don't care what the pushback is.
Tell us a little bit how you got involved and what exactly specifically your mission is.
I got involved because I started hearing, in one particular case, had been told about procedures that were being used against a student who was accused of sexual misconduct. And my reaction as an attorney was, you can't do that. This is America. You can't treat people that way. You can't deny them access to the evidence against them. You can't not show them the complaint. You can't not consider their evidence because, in retrospect, I learned it was because of these trauma-informed theories, and they don't care about anything that happened before or after the alleged event. They completely disregard context of relationships. And I didn't at the time understand that, but now I know that it was because they believe that victim behavior is counterintuitive due to trauma, and they may lie, or they may, act like there's not a problem, but that's all evidence of trauma.
What bothers me, and I'm a university professor, I have had my run-ins with this. What alarms me is the degree to which universities aren't interested in what actually happened. They are interested in supporting almost in every case, the female narrative, the accuser's narrative in this case. I had a student about a year ago who accused me of political harassment. That was literally the thing she made up, because she didn't like the politics of the authors of the books we were reading. And so my initial response was, this isn't going to go anywhere because it's a stupid complaint. No one has a right to protected political speech. The university, without telling me, changed it from a political complaint to a transgender complaint, didn't let me know about the change, didn't tell me they were going to investigate me for that, gave me no opportunity to defend myself from that, and they went ahead and prosecuted their case. So it's really bad out there on college campuses. And the organization you put together is pretty remarkable. How long has it been going, and how many people have you helped?
I didn't start the organization, but I was on their first board of directors back in 2014. And like I said, we have over 1,000 people that have come to us. Gradually that number is increasing every year, I think, as we become more well known. We don't normally advocate for individual cases, but because our families we've been able to facilitate their connection with each other, they are a wealth of knowledge. And we have hundreds of families telling each other what they went through, giving them advice, especially important if they can't afford a lawyer, which is often true.
It sounds like a really important support network, especially the legal advice for people who are really overwhelmed about the idea that they're going to have to retain legal counsel. Talk a little bit about what you think is going on here with the number of cases of particularly young white women accusing black college-age boys of rape or sexual harassment, and the staggering number that turn out to be not true.
I honestly don't, other than the historical part of that, I don't understand why that would be in this day and age. They say they're not racist, but that's perfect evidence of racism to me. We also notice it isn't just Black, it's all minorities and anyone who can't afford an attorney. So lower socioeconomic students and also minorities are often targets. I think, and maybe this is just, me being skeptical, that schools often know who can afford an attorney. And so they're not as worried about these cases. But when an attorney is there, at a very minimum, they pay more attention to their rules.
One of my theories, and I'd like to know your thought on it, is intersectionality, this argument, this new radical sort of modish argument that all forms of oppression are ultimately the same form of oppression. That if we're going to look at toxic masculinity, that transcends racial boundaries. And so we're going to rope young Black men the same way we're going to rope young white men. We're not going to distinguish about that. This idea of intersectionality where you narrow down the possible perpetrators and you magnify the victims so that every grievance industry is working together against the same common enemy seems to be what's happening here, at least with regards to masculinity on college campuses.
The whole intersectionality idea, and then they bring in women's rights and, how men are patriarchal, and I just don't understand that. I'm sorry. I think it ignores history. And the current situation with women who are fine, who are out in the workplace in equal capacities, getting paid almost exactly what men are for the number of hours worked and the experience they have. So I think a lot of this is just hype that started on campus, and for some reason, maybe because the students are graduating, has permeated the general public.
From your perspective as a lawyer and looking at these cases, these thousand or so people who've come to your organization, what are the primary ways that universities skirt the law or ignore it altogether when it comes to not investigating or not giving kids, particularly men in this case, due process?
Well, the first thing they do is they try to bring in a student and interrogate him, and sometimes her, but usually him, before they've allowed that student to know what they're accused of. The second thing they do is they often don't give the accused student the complaint. And like you said before, if you're looking for the truth, why would you not allow somebody to see the allegations against them? I don't understand that. They will interview witnesses on behalf of the accuser, but not on behalf of the accused. They, in the past, have had gag orders where the accused was not allowed to speak to anyone on campus about the allegations, and yet those are his witnesses more likely than not. So that, in the new regs, apparently, it looks like that will be taken out. That'll be forbidden. But evidence that comes in of a victim or accuser's pre- and post-event behavior is often disregarded based on these unscientific trauma-informed theories. Inconsistent behavior, which is a primary defense of most people accused of these crimes or offenses, is undermined by these victim trauma theories because they can't cite to say, the complainant sent wonderful, loving texts for months, like in the Mattress Girl case, or, she continued to sleep with the guy for months or longer sometimes, which is very common in our cases. But then after something happens, like he makes eyes at another woman, he sleeps with another woman, whatever, all of a sudden, retroactively, there's this accusation that this one night back when was actually an assault. But the schools don't want to consider that evidence, the context of the parties' relationship, because they think the only relevant evidence has to do with the night in question, and that's just crazy. Fortunately, a couple of courts have come out and said, motivation and context is very important. So that, not allowing attorneys to speak, that's a problem because colleges bring their own in-house counsel into these hearings. So it's in-house counsel versus a 18 or 19-year-old unsophisticated kid who really doesn't know what he's supposed to do to defend himself. And the biggest problem I see is that the campuses will say, well, just trust us, tell us the truth and everything will be fine, which the kid doesn't spend a lot of time collecting evidence because he believes the school is loyal to him as well. He gets into these hearings and he's blindsided by all the evidence on the other side and little or none on his own side. And then, he calls his parents and it's basically too late or almost too late in most cases to resolve the problem.
And you're exactly right. Given the racial history of this country, when those students, with everything you said, all of the coercion, the deception, all of the fake cozying up to you only to betray you later, when you think about that in the consequences of Jim Crow and everything that went before it, I mean, these universities that so desperately preach their inclusivity, my goodness, this is a huge black eye for them. And they seem to be skirting under the media on this. I mean, outside of the reporting at TheCollegeFix, not a lot of people are talking about this period. Let me ask you this quick question. What damage, or to what degree did the Obama administration's kind of gerrymandering Title IX with its Dear Colleague letter, right? The idea that the Obama administration suggested that we need to not listen to both sides when it comes to rape allegations on campus. Has that made this much worse, or it seems like the courts are beginning to try to rectify that off campus?
The courts are beginning to see what's happening, but for a long time they were of the attitude that they should defer to schools because that was their expertise. Of course, cheating is their expertise, but sexual assault is not. And yes, the Obama administration did massive destruction of, the process to find students responsible. They broadened the definitions to ridiculous descriptions like unwanted conduct of a sexual nature, which was interpreted subjectively according to how the complainant felt. They obviously lowered the standard or mandated a very low standard. The victims' advocates are off to say, well, the Dear Colleague letter says that the accused student has due process. But in fact, it also says that the due process owed to the accused student should not be allowed to interfere with the rights of the victim. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, sort of, not really. The whole package was geared toward finding more students guilty. And, in a lot of attitudes on campus, that makes up for the past where women were ignored. And, I'm sorry, you can't ruin one person's life based on statistical likelihoods from the past.
In your experience now with all these families, what advice would you give young college-age men on college campuses if they find themselves accused or to perhaps prevent themselves getting accused on college campuses?
I would say to contact their parents immediately upon any sense of an accusation. Immediately. And secondly, I would contact FACE because that's what we do. We get people connected with lawyers if they can afford it. We get people connected with other more experienced families who have a wealth of knowledge, like I said. They need to be educated very quickly when they're thrown into this situation.
Fantastic. Cynthia Garrett, great pleasure talking to you today. You do great work. Keep it up. Thanks for your time. The vast majority of universities in this country are public universities, which means a whole lot of state, federal, and local money goes into taxpayer money, goes into prop these institutions up. And because of that, they should be held to the same standards that any other state and federal entity is held to with regards to the United States Constitution. They must provide due process when it comes to legal matters. In the case that we've been talking about today, where young men and boys on American campuses are not allowed, when they're accused of sexual assault, not allowed to hire attorneys in some cases, not allowed to confront their accusers in some cases, not even, in some cases, told the specific charges against them. All this done in the name of the #MeToo movement, the Believe All Survivors, #Believe All Women movement. Now, the problem with this is that we know that women are human beings, and that we have so much evidence that some women are willing to make this up. We have 2 women who accuse Brett Kavanaugh of horrible, horrible things physically. who now have recanted and are under investigation by the FBI because they lied for political reasons. What happens when you create unequal justice like this? And this is ironic to me because universities are always talking that their focus is social justice, evening up that which is unequal. Well, here you have a clear-cut situation where boys are being denied their rights and girls are being asked to believe no matter what they say. That, my friends, is a system based on faith. It is not a system based on law or reason. It's based on faith. Faith is one of those things that universities say there's very little room for on college campuses. Faith is one of those things that progressives at universities tend to mock. The problem with faith when dealing with law is that it's very easy for your faith to become dogmatic and then become inquisitorial and start punishing the people who disagree with you and disagree with your faith. And if we do reinstate for young men on college campuses their due process rights, that means it's not going to be a faith-based proposition for either men or women. It's going to be based on evidence. Let the evidence determine guilt and innocence. That's much better for men and much better for women in the long run as well. And that's The Final Fix. Be sure to stay up on all the latest news and information from The College Fix by joining us on all of our social media platforms. For the Campus Roundup, I'm Dr. Duke, and we will see you next time.